Have you ever, like, really paid attention to what actually happens inside your body when a web page takes longer than, say, 3 seconds to load?
Oh, it is wild if you track the physiology.
Right. Your heart rate literally spikes. You get this tiny hit of cortisol flooding your system. You might, clench your jaw. We experience genuine biological distress over a 3-second delay. And well, if you are behind the wheel of a car, you probably instinctively honk if the person in front of you hesitates for even a fraction of a second at a green light. I mean, we're living in the age of now.
Yeah, it is a profound physiological mismatch. We're operating with these ancient nervous systems in a world that has, well, completely eradicated friction. I mean, we measure internet speeds in milliseconds, and we summon groceries to our doorsteps with a thumbprint.
Exactly.
We are running this relentless, invisible race against time itself, and frankly, it is wearing us down.
Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. Looking through our stack of research today, the central theme is this lost virtue that we desperately need to reclaim if we want to survive this culture of speed. We are talking about patience. And okay, let's unpack this, because I know what you, the listener, are probably visualizing right now.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. When you hear the word patience, the default image is usually like someone just sitting around doing nothing. A totally passive state of staring at the clock, enduring boredom, because you literally have no other choice.
Right, we tend to view patience as a state of powerlessness, a lack of agency. But the sources we are looking at today, they flip that definition completely upside down. True patience isn't empty waiting. It is a deeply active, dynamic state of spirit.
Active, not passive.
Exactly. It is the psychological ability to maintain a focused, positive attitude while working incredibly hard without any immediate reward. It's having the internal architecture to endure the darkness of the night because you are, well, absolutely certain of the dawn.
I mean, that is a massive paradigm shift. So to figure out how to actually build that internal architecture, we are going to extract wisdom from a pretty wild variety of sources today. We have natural biology, Eastern mysticism, Western Stoicism, and even the workshops of history's most brilliant inventors.
And if we are redefining patience as an active mechanical process of growth, I think we should start by looking at the ultimate master of process.
Nature.
Right, nature. Nature never operates on a deadline, yet everything eventually reaches its full potential.
Yeah, in the notes, there is a really prominent story about the Chinese bamboo tree. And I have to admit, when I first read it, it sounded a bit like a motivational poster you'd find in a high school guidance counselor's office.
Oh, for sure.
But the mechanics behind it are actually fascinating. Unlike a tomato plant where you drop a seed in the ground and, see a green sprout days later, this bamboo operates on a totally different biological timeline. A farmer plants the seed, waters it, and fertilizes the soil. An entire year passes, and there is absolutely nothing but bare dirt.
Just dirt.
Year 2, nothing. Year 3, year 4. The farmer is watering an empty patch of dirt every single day for 4 years.
And to a neighbor walking by, it looks like a complete delusion. It looks like a sunk cost fallacy in action.
Totally.
But then we hit the 5th year. That bamboo tree finally breaks the surface of the soil. And when it does, it shoots up to a staggering height of 90 feet in just 6 weeks. Which raises an important question, kind of the central riddle of this phenomenon. Did that bamboo tree grow 90 feet in 6 weeks? Or did it grow 90 feet in 5 years?
Well, the biological reality is that it took 5 years.
It took 5 years. And this reveals the first fundamental law of patience. Growth is almost always invisible. During those 4 years of apparent barrenness, that tree was not dormant.
It was working.
It was actively undergoing subterranean resource allocation. It was building a massive, complex underground root system. It required that incredibly dense foundational network to physically support the towering height it was programmed to reach. If the farmer had stopped watering in year 4, starving the invisible process, the tree would have died before it ever saw the sun.
Wow. And think about how that maps onto your own life right now. Imagine you are trying to learn a complex new skill, like, writing code or speaking a new language. Or maybe you're in the early stages of starting a business. You are putting in the daily reps. You are doing the grueling work.
The unglamorous stuff.
Exactly. But for a long time, you feel like you are just staring at bare dirt. You don't see any external validation or financial return. The patience comes from understanding that you are building the root system.
Because just because the results aren't breaking the surface doesn't mean the metabolic work isn't happening. The sources highlight another natural transformation to hammer this home. There's a proverb that says, patience turns the mulberry leaf into silk.
It's a beautiful image, but what is the actual mechanism there? Like, how does that work practically?
It is entirely about metabolic patience.
Huh.
You start with a rigid, rough mulberry leaf. Through the slow, unglamorous digestion of the silkworm, that rough material is broken down and reconstituted into one of the most luxurious, resilient fabrics on Earth.
So you can't rush it.
No, you cannot physically extract the silk from the worm ahead of schedule. You cannot hack the process to make it faster. The transformation requires time as a primary ingredient. As the Persian poet Saadi Shirazi observed, have patience. All things are difficult before they become easy.
That makes biological sense, but honestly, it brings up a huge psychological hurdle. If the growth is invisible, like the roots of the bamboo or the silk inside the worm, how do we prevent ourselves from losing our minds in the meantime? How do we maintain our sanity when we are, just watering dirt?
That is the million-dollar question. We have to shift from the external biology of nature to the internal cognitive landscape of the human mind. The Eastern philosophical traditions offer a brilliant framework for this. They don't just tell you to endure the wait. They provide the cognitive vision required to wait without suffering.
Right, I noticed this specific term kept popping up in the sources regarding Eastern philosophy. Sabr, S-A-B-R. It translates roughly to patience, but the texts treat it as a foundational pillar of human wisdom. The mystic poet Jalal al-Din Rumi seemed completely obsessed with it.
Rumi's framework for patience is profound because he removes the element of victimhood. He doesn't frame sabr as gritting your teeth and suffering through a delay. He frames it as a superior form of perception.
How so?
He wrote, "Patience is not sitting and waiting, it is foreseeing. It is looking at the thorn and seeing the rose, looking at the night and seeing the day. Lovers are patient and know that the moon needs time to become full."
So he's asking us to mentally collapse the timeline, to see the inevitable end state while we are still stuck in the messy beginning.
Precisely. When you possess that specific type of cognitive reframing, you are no longer a prisoner of a frustrating present moment. You appreciate the necessity of the current phase. You know the moon requires a specific orbital cycle to appear full from our vantage point on Earth, so...
Screaming at a crescent moon for being incomplete would be absurd.
Exactly. You granted the grace of its own process.
Okay, I understand the theory, but I have to push back on the application here. Looking at the thorn and seeing the rose sounds incredibly poetic when you're sitting in a comfortable armchair. But what happens when things are objectively terrible?
Right.
Like when you're going through a brutal breakup or a financial crisis or a scary health diagnosis, it feels nearly impossible to just see the rose when you are actively bleeding from the thorns.
And Eastern philosophy doesn't dismiss the reality of that pain. It actually addresses it through a concept called emotional equilibrium. There's a prominent fable in the text about a king who is being destroyed by his own volatile emotions. He was euphoric in victory and utterly suicidal in defeat.
High highs and low lows.
Exactly. So he demanded his scholars forge him a ring that would serve as a psychological anchor. Something that would make him happy when he was devastated, but also ground him when he was overly joyful.
A single object that balances both extremes. That's a tall order.
It is. After extensive deliberation, the scholars presented him with a plain silver ring. Inscribed on the inside was a simple grounding phrase, "This too shall pass."
This too shall pass.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, patience is fundamentally rooted in the acceptance of impermanence. When you are in the depths of a crisis, patience serves as a life raft, reminding you that the pain is temporary. This too shall pass. But critically, when you are succeeding, when your ego is inflating, patience serves as an anchor, whispering, "Stay humble, for this too shall pass."
Wow.
It regulates the nervous system against the wild swings of human experience. Rumi warned against the frantic haste of the ego, stating, "He who has no patience has no wings." Without the ability to contextualize our current moment within a larger timeline, we become entirely grounded by petty, immediate frustrations.
So the Eastern view treats patience almost like water, right? Flowing around obstacles, accepting impermanence, maintaining vision. But looking at the next section of our sources, we hit a totally different paradigm. What happens when life throws an immovable object in your path?
Something that isn't just going to pass quickly.
Exactly. This is where the Western Stoic tradition comes in. And they treat patience less like water and much more like a reinforced concrete bunker.
The Stoic approach is entirely about defining the boundaries of our own agency.
And Marcus Aurelius is the ultimate case study here. I mean, he was a Roman emperor commanding the largest superpower on the globe. His daily reality was managing border wars, devastating plagues, and constant political betrayal. Yet his personal journal, the Meditations, is essentially a manual on how to build an impenetrable mind through endurance.
The central operating system of Stoicism relies on a stark, uncompromising division between what we can control and what we cannot.
Right, the Stoics recognize that the external world is largely out of our hands. We cannot control the macroeconomic climate, the terrible traffic on the highway, or the delayed flight at the airport. We can only control the internal mechanism of our response. I read a great analogy recently that perfectly visualizes this friction.
What is it?
Well, being impatient is essentially throwing a tantrum against reality. It's like a person standing out in the middle of a torrential thunderstorm, screaming at the sky, demanding that the clouds stop raining.
Screaming at the sky instead of taking the incredibly simple action of opening an umbrella.
Exactly. You are standing there getting drenched, expending all this emotional energy, being furious at the atmospheric pressure, instead of just dealing with the reality of the weather.
Seneca, another foundational Stoic philosopher, investigated the psychology behind that exact tantrum. He argued that human beings suffer far more in our imagination than we do in reality.
So we create our own misery.
We do. The mechanism of our impatience, that screaming at the rain, stems entirely from a mismatch in expectations. We walk out the door expecting the world to cater to us. We expect the commute to be seamless, the wifey to be instantaneous, the people around us to be polite. So when reality inevitably presents friction, our brains register it as a personal attack.
We take the traffic jam personally.
Yes, we rebel against the natural resistance of life instead of anticipating it.
That mental endurance becomes a superpower when people face deep, unavoidable hardship. The sources bring up the English poet John Milton. He went completely blind in his mid-40s.
A catastrophic loss for anyone, but especially for a writer at the peak of his career.
Right. He could have easily surrendered to the bitterness of that reality. He could have spent the rest of his life screaming at the sky about the unfairness of his biology. But instead, he utilized this muscular, stoic patience. He dictated his monumental epic, Paradise Lost, entirely through spoken word to his daughters.
That is just incredible.
He even wrote a sonnet specifically addressing his blindness, concluding with the line, "They also serve who only stand and wait."
You know, here's where it gets really interesting, because in the Western canon, patience is inextricably linked to the concept of grit. It transcends mere acceptance and becomes an active refusal to yield. This connects directly to the poet Rudyard Kipling. In his famous poem, If, he outlines the ultimate psychological test of human character. He writes, "If you can wait and not be tired by waiting."
Not be tired by waiting. That implies that the act of waiting usually drains our energy. But if we harness patience correctly, the wait itself becomes a source of strength. Okay, so we've covered the philosophy. We've looked at nature's biology, the Eastern mystics' vision, and the Stoics' umbrella. But I want to know how this translates to tangible, measurable success. We are moving from ancient philosophy into the workshops of history's absolute greatest geniuses.
And when you analyze the data of historical achievement, a very clear pattern emerges. History is rarely shaped by the fastest intellects. It is shaped by those with the highest threshold for sustained frustration.
Thomas Edison is the perfect example in our research. When he was attempting to develop the nickel-iron battery, he didn't just tinker around for a few weeks. The records show he conducted over 10,000 separate failed experiments.
10,000.
A colleague actually approached him and asked how he could withstand the demoralization of doing so much labor with zero results. And Edison famously rejected the premise of the question. He stated that he hadn't failed at all. He had successfully identified 10,000 distinct methods that did not work.
That is a masterclass in cognitive reframing.
Yeah.
And you see the exact same alchemy of genius when you look at Michelangelo.
Ah, the Sistine Chapel ceiling.
Right. He spent 4 agonizing years suspended on scaffolding to paint that ceiling. We aren't just talking about the passage of time. We are talking about severe biomechanical toll. He was working with wet plaster dripping into his eyes, his spine contorted in unnatural positions for 12 hours a day. He permanently damaged his vision and his physical health for that commission.
And the detail work is staggering. He was painting immaculate hidden corners up near the ceiling that no human eye standing on the floor of the chapel could ever possibly see.
When questioned why he labored with such excruciating precision over microscopic details that would remain entirely invisible to the public, he gave a purely intrinsically motivated answer: God sees. Michelangelo himself summarized his entire creative philosophy by stating, "Genius is eternal patience."
Genius is eternal patience.
Modern society suffers from a severe disconnect here. We want the masterpiece without acknowledging the mess. We stand under the Sistine Chapel and marvel at the raw talent, entirely ignoring the thousands of hours of intense boredom, the tedious mixing of pigments, the physical agony. We've been conditioned to desire the glory without the grind, but as these historical sources make abundantly clear, the grind is the infrastructure of the glory.
And it's not just historical anecdotes either. The sources dive into some heavy behavioral science to back this up, specifically the famous Stanford marshmallow experiment from the late 60s and 70s.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah, you bring a young child into a room, place a single marshmallow on the table, and offer a deal. You can eat this marshmallow right now. But if you can wait in this room by yourself for 15 minutes without eating it, I will bring you a second marshmallow.
It was a brilliantly simple way to measure a complex cognitive function: delayed gratification.
So what does this all mean for the kids who actually manage to sit on their hands and wait? Because, 15 minutes for a toddler is a lifetime. The sources note that the researchers tracked these kids for decades. What did they find?
The longitudinal data was staggering. The children who demonstrated the capacity to wait, who successfully delayed their immediate gratification, showed dramatically different life outcomes. They had significantly higher SAT scores, lower body mass indices, lower rates of substance abuse, and generally more stable, successful adult lives.
All of that correlates back to resisting a marshmallow.
Well, because the marshmallow was merely a proxy for executive function. It tested the development of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and regulating impulses. When a child waits for the second marshmallow, they are physically strengthening the neural pathways that prioritize long-term reward over short-term dopamine hits. Almost everything of actual enduring value in human life operates on this exact mechanism.
That makes total sense.
Earning a university degree, compounding investments for financial freedom, building a resilient marriage, training for a marathon. Every single one of these achievements requires the cognitive ability to say no to an easy, immediate pleasure in exchange for a complex future reward.
You have to fundamentally wire your brain to trade the now for the later.
Precisely. The ability to delay gratification is perhaps the single most accurate predictor of a successful human life.
Okay, so the philosophical, historical, and neurological evidence for patience is overwhelming. We've seen it in the biology of the bamboo, in Rumi's cognitive vision, in the Stoics' umbrella, and in the prefrontal cortex of those kids in the marshmallow study. But here is the critical question for you listening to this right now. How on earth do we actually practice this today? Because we are navigating a digital ecosystem that is quite literally engineered by the smartest behavioral psychologists on the planet to hijack our dopamine receptors and completely obliterate our patience.
It is an incredibly hostile environment for this specific virtue. But the sources provide a very clear three-step roadmap to begin reclaiming this cognitive real estate.
Let's break those down. Step 1, reframe the wait. When you find yourself trapped in gridlock traffic or standing in a brutally slow-moving line at the pharmacy, you have to consciously intervene in your own thought process. Stop categorizing it as wasted time. Treat it as found time.
This targets the psychological friction of modern life. We are so obsessed with optimization that any gap in our productivity feels like a failure. Reframing the wait allows you to use that gap. It is an opportunity to downshift your nervous system. Take a breath, observe the architecture of the room, notice the people around you. It is permission to simply exist for 5 minutes without the pressure of producing or consuming.
I love that. Okay, step 2, trust the process. This is where we bring back the Chinese bamboo tree. When you are putting in the exhausting work on a project, a relationship, or a physical goal, and you are seeing zero external metrics of success, you have to remind yourself that your most critical growth is happening underground.
Because if you bypass the root building phase, your structure will inevitably collapse under its own weight once it finally grows. The invisible work is the most important work.
And finally, step 3, practice micro-patience. The sources emphasize that this might be the most difficult habit to build. You have to actively resist the urge to pull out your smartphone the very millisecond you feel a hint of boredom. If you are waiting for an elevator, just wait for the elevator. Sit with the acute discomfort of being understimulated.
What's fascinating here is the neuroscience of what happens when you do that. We have been conditioned to treat boredom like a dangerous pathogen that must be instantly eradicated with a glowing screen. But neurologically, creativity and problem-solving rely on something called the default mode network in the brain. This network only activates when you are unfocused and slightly bored. When you instantly medicate your boredom with a social media feed, you are actively starving the exact neural pathways where your best ideas are generated.
You are short-circuiting your own cognitive potential just to avoid 30 seconds of silence. That's honestly terrifying.
The 14th century English poet William Langland wrote in Piers Plowman, "Patience is a fair virtue." It sounds like a quaint, archaic platitude, but it is a deeply profound operational strategy.
To pair with that, Leo Tolstoy synthesized the entire concept flawlessly in War and Peace. He wrote, "The strongest of all warriors are these two: time and patience."
Time is the medium that allows the events of our lives to unfold, and patience is the armor that allows us to endure the friction of that unfolding.
So synthesizing everything we've explored from the sources today, patience is ultimately an act of profound love. It is a baseline respect for yourself, a dedication to the quality of the work you are doing, and an acceptance of the natural rhythm of your life. You cannot force a river to flow any faster than its current allows. You can only learn to steer your boat with skill and grace.
This week, when you inevitably feel that familiar, hot spike of cortisol and patience rising up in your chest, try to consciously interrupt the reflex. Remember the subterranean roots of the bamboo. Remember the Stoic calmly deploying an umbrella in the storm. Remember Rumi looking at the dark night and insisting on the dawn. Just take a breath, wait, observe, and trust that what rightfully belongs to you will arrive precisely when you are ready to receive it.
And I want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over as you step back into your day. All the research we decoded today proved that patience yields remarkable personal success and deep emotional equilibrium. It builds the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel and earns the second marshmallow. But consider the macroeconomic reality we live in today. We exist in an attention economy. Massive algorithmic corporations generate their revenue directly off of your fleeting attention, your manufactured outrage, and your instant compulsive clicks. So perhaps today, cultivating patience is no longer just a quaint personal virtue aimed at self-improvement. Perhaps choosing to wait, choosing to sit quietly with your own unmedicated boredom, and outright refusing to be rushed, well, perhaps that is the ultimate act of modern rebellion. You aren't just passing time. You are actively taking back ownership of your own mind. So the next time that traffic light turns green, maybe just give it one full second before you honk. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.